Bienvenidos, señoras y señores, to episode 7 of La Yuma Cubana. Today we're going to be talking to La Prima, or cousin. She's going to be sharing a little bit about her upbringing in Cuba, what she had to claim in order to be granted permission to leave her homeland, and how she started her life anew here in the United States. So without further ado, La Prima. Enjoy. We're here with my cousin, Clara. Thank you for taking the time and being here with us. All right, let's get started. If you could talk a little bit about your upbringing in Cuba, and what memories do you have? Me, the best. I come from a family of 6 brothers and 2 sisters. It was nice because we lived near the ocean. We didn't have internet or tablets, but we had paichi, bicycles, roller skates. It was nice. We were always together. My grandmother had a lot of siblings. How do you think that people raise so many kids on such a low income? No. Sometimes one had pants and the other one didn't have shoes. Sometimes my father would break his pants on the knee level and my mother would make a pair of shorts for my youngest brother. Sometimes we didn't have underwear, but we were happy. All right, what was your first memory and your recognition that there were other countries aside from Cuba and that they were different from Cuba? I was born with Fidel. I was 2 years of age when he came to power. So in my house, my father was a revolutionist. We didn't know anything about Santeria. All we knew was Marxist theory. That's what I was born and raised on. I knew that there were other countries because I went to school, but my father always told me that in the United States, it was a very rapid, fast-paced country. Never did anybody try to influence me to come over. I didn't even have any interest to come. I mean, really, I was like 23, 24 years of age when I came. I came to know, good quality perfumes when my tia came to visit me. But everything else, it just didn't interest me. So was it that they spoke poorly about the United States? No, it's just I had this really hot boyfriend, and I just had no reason to leave Cuba. Why would I come? All right, so you weren't under the illusion of this American dream. I was born into a recession and raised in a recession. I was poor. I continue to be poor. That aspiration of wealth and materialistic things, it never did catch my attention. So why did you come to Cuba then? Well, in the 80s I had an uncle. So how old are you around? Like 22, 23. So my uncle came and my mother said, there's a lot of you, so I need each one of you to kind of find your own path. So I presented myself, told them I was a prostitute, and left Cuba. Why did they let you leave because you said you were a prostitute? Well, in Cuba, the prostitution was prohibited. You couldn't talk to foreigners. You couldn't sell your body. Back then, what's going on now wasn't happening. To say that you were a prostitute was one of the worst things you could do. All right, so what were other reasons they allowed people to leave Cuba? Well, men that said that they were homosexual, and people that broke into the embassy, or prostitute. Those are the reasons that they would let you leave. So who gave you this idea to say that you were a prostitute? Well, the other women on the block, we got together and talked about it. And my mom told me about this uncle, and that she would stay behind in Cuba with my younger brothers. And also, she had this commander that helped her a lot with the paperwork. So your mother wanted you to leave Cuba? Yeah, because she thought eventually she would join me there with my brothers. But when she got to the Mariel, and they presented themselves. They said that my brothers were too young, and so they couldn't leave. So I stayed in Florida, and she stayed in Cuba. So what was the process of them giving you this permission to go to Cuba? Well, they transferred me to the Mosquito. There were a lot of little stones and rocks and mosquitoes, as the name implies. And they gave us this horrible food, but we had to eat it. I was 89 pounds wet and 70 pounds dry. So then I arrived here to the States, and they put us in the Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida. They gave us clothes. They gave us black beans and rice with pork. It was delicious. So my grandfather came to claim me, and he took me to the house where my uncles lived in Miami. I couldn't talk. I couldn't have friends. I slept on the floor with my other cousin until one day I called my aunt, and she came to pick me up, and I never returned to that house. I stayed here in Fort Lauderdale. So how did you start your life anew? I was very afraid. I didn't know the language. I had never been separated from my family. So my aunt got me a job in a factory. I left Cuba on the 17th of May, and on the 17th of July, I started to work here in the States until the sun that rises today. Wow, so you didn't waste any time? Nope, started working right away. So were you able to send money back to Cuba? Hell no. When I got here, you couldn't go to Cuba and visit. You couldn't send money. No. I mean, besides, I was making $2.50 an hour, so what was I going to send? I barely had anything. So I kept working, and then I wanted to be a mother. And I had my first son in '82. And then, so my life from then on has just been work. I got married. I had a second son. I bought a home in New Jersey. I worked with Donald Trump in one of his hotels. I met him in person. He would come and shake our hands. He was very tall, but what he had in height, he had in ugliness. And I worked a long time there. I first worked in room service. And then my last position was as a bus person. I also worked as a hostess as well. So how were you able to communicate with the customers? Well, my father's son, my second son, he was born in America. So, I mean, in the beginning, no, I would constantly ask him, you know, and I would say to people, me, come back later. And he'd laugh at me and he'd say, you don't have to say me. And then little by little, I kept asking him what this meant, what that meant, until eventually one day, I understood. How long do you think it took you before you became fluent in English and were able to have conversations with the customers? Well, you know, when there's necessity, you learn real quick. And I was raising two boys. So in about 1 year or two, yeah, I understood. I don't speak it like an American, but I can definitely defend myself. As far as the American dream is concerned, yes, Clara, please do tell me what your perspective is on that, and not just yours, but like, what do you think it means to Cuban people as well? Well, people think that the mango trees grow bills, and that the garbage dumps are full of cash. And that's not the way it is. I mean, the taxes here you have to pay, and the things that you have to, they take out of your check on top of the taxes. They say that, yeah, the Fidel would take money and steal money, but at the end of the day, the same thing's done here. I mean, the money that you worked hard for, they take it out, so it's the same story. I mean, here, it's kind of like a communism disguised. So why did you come here to Fort Lauderdale instead of Miami? Oh, no. I'm kind of allergic to Cubans. I mean, they talk a lot of trash. They stick their noses in places it doesn't belong. The way that we talk, it's as though we're fighting. And you have a cousin that doesn't really tolerate crap from anybody, so it's best I stay here with the Americans. I mean, look, if I go to Miami and I see like a little Cuban red flag, I avoid it like the plague. So, when did you return to Cuba? Well, when my father died, I went back for the funeral. But imagine, I was a single mom, raising 2 boys. I would wake up at 7 a.m. and I wouldn't get home until 11 p.m. This went on for about 2 years. And then I was able to bring my mother and father over for a visit. But they didn't want to stay. I think had I lived in Miami instead of Fort Lauderdale, they probably would have stayed. I mean, it was more suitable to their culture. They had the bodegas and the Spanish markets, things that they were more accustomed to. So how many years elapsed from when you left to when you returned? Around 20 years or so. Oh, so how did you find Cuba when you did finally go back? Well, where I lived, there was this avenue called Avenue 70, and they had balconies made of marble. It was beautiful. And then when I got back, it looked more of like a prison than a neighborhood. So I went to a market with my brother to buy some meat, and it had around 18,000 flies on it. I was like, hey, doesn't the public health inspectors come through here? And the guy's like, oh yeah, she must be from over there. And there was a store right down the street from where I used to live. It didn't have not one single potato. So then there was a girl that was sitting there. And I mean, imagine, like, all my friends had moved away. I didn't know anyone. There was a couple of girls there, and so they said, oh yeah, once I get to the States, I'm going to be a prostitute. And I'm like, listen, sweetheart, to be a prostitute in the United States, you have to be pretty. Can you imagine these young girls, like, instead of saying, yeah, I'm going to go over there and, like, better myself and prosper, no, I'm going to be a prostitute. No, so I mean, Cubans came here and they became entrepreneurs. They opened up businesses everywhere from here to New Jersey. So how do you envision your life had you not left Cuba? Man, you know, I look at myself in the mirror all the time and I'm like, God, had I not left, I'd still be with that papi chulo and probably have like 4 of his little nuggets running around. And I probably wouldn't have, you know, had to work so hard in my life. Because here you have to work. I mean, I raised both my boys by myself without any child support or any welfare. So Clara, you see students where you work, right? That have come from Cuba. Yes, I have a cousin who has this little group, and she helps them earn community service hours. And those kids, yes, they have aspirations. They want to be doctors. They want to be something, right, with this opportunity to be here. However, there's other kids that don't care. They walk around with their pants hanging down, showing their underwear. They wear brand name clothes. They're more concerned with what girl can they get. And they're wasting their time, their teacher's time, and their classmates' time. So, Clara, I think that Cuba's rich in other sentiments, not monetary. Yeah, I mean, look, when you live there in Cuba, everybody knows everybody in the neighborhood. I mean, you were born there and you die there basically in the same house. But it's beautiful. I mean, look, you know everybody. Everybody's either, you know, you call them your tío, your uncle, or your cousin. It's very cohesive. So, Clara, why do you think that there's that difference? It's the technology. Nobody wants to talk to anyone anymore. If you go to a restaurant, there's barely anyone talking. There's just ding-ding-ding on their phones. Yeah, there's no more communication. Nobody writes, you know, a handwritten letter anymore. There's nothing like that. And the sentiment is not that people change, but just not to be so consumed by it. You know, people are more concerned with Apple 6 or 7 or whatever. I don't really know much about Apple, but that's what they're worried about, materialistic things. There's a corner in Cuba, and Cuba's already kind of starting with this, that there are certain areas in the Wi-Fi parks that people don't talk. You know what, Clara? That's a very interesting point for me as well. So, the phones in Cuba are prepaid. Every minute that you talk, you pay for it. So the people speak with purpose. There's a point to the conversation. You're not just going to talk frivolously. Same thing with the internet. You have to buy the Wi-Fi cards in order to get online. and you have X number of minutes. So maybe Tuesday, Thursdays from 4:30 to 6:30 at a park in a rural part. The guy comes with the equipment, propagates a signal, and you might get online. And so, yeah, when that starts, people don't talk. So Clara says, you know, if you ask a couple, what do you prefer, having sex or being on the phone? And a couple will probably say the phone. That's a shame. That's a shame. So Clara, you know, for us to be the change that we wish to see in the world, what advice would you give? Well, I have a guy that works with me. He has a younger daughter. He brought her here to the States. Around what age? She was like 14? Okay, so she was a young lady. So she had black nail polish, rode a skateboard, really short shorts. And I told him, you know, watch your daughter. So I guess he got offended. You know where she is now with 16 years of age? She's in Ecuador in a rehab. They try to kill her at gunpoint here in the States. So for him to find help for his daughter here in the States, you either have to have money or really good insurance. So you're implying that this sort of thing doesn't really happen that often in Cuba? No. No, in Cuba, it's a healthier way of raising your kids. If I had it all to do again, I wouldn't have kids in this country. I'd have kids either in Cuba or in another country. All right, Clara, so what advice would you give to the people in Cuba in this modern day? You know, like you're saying, that there's this American influence, that this capitalism is coming into that country, so that they don't dissolve their roots and their culture. Well, I would suggest, you know, I understand that everybody has to be in modern times, but just don't take it so much to heart, this technology and all these things. So the doctor that took care of my father, right? He had a car, but he didn't have any money to fill it up with gas. And apart from his job at the hospital, he would teach classes at the University of Havana. And he would go to all these places riding a bicycle. No, I believe it. When I was in Havana, my cousin said, hey, you see that lady over there in the corner waiting for the bus? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh, that lady's a surgeon. She's waiting for the bus to get to work. Yeah, there's a lot of stories like that in Cuba. A doctor waiting for the bus to get to work. If you saw that here, it would be very strange. It just doesn't happen here in the States. I think it's a different motive, right? If you study medicine, it's because you have an interest and passion in doing so. So, Clara, what do you think is going to happen next year when Raul steps down and there's no longer Castro in power? Well, what I hope is that the Cuban people will rise and struggle against for what they believe in, instead of suffer. Struggle. Clara, Cuba's always struggled for their freedom. Yeah, but not with Fidel. All right, Clara, well, why do you think that is? Because they toppled Machado and they toppled Batista. Why do you think it was different with Fidel? Well, Fidel was more intelligent than all of them. You know, he took away all the arms. What are you going to fight, with stones and arrows? No. Apart from that, there was psychological warfare. He would manipulate them psychologically. I mean, think about it. He gave the peasants land. And so he definitely won people over. Not me, though. I mean, you know, I was 2 years of age, and I was like, no, yeah. So he didn't influence me at all. So, Clara, what advice would you give yourself when you first came? God, I wish I had the wisdom that I had now and the age that I was when I first got here. All right, so if there was a pair of jeans that I wanted, even if it was like $200, I'd buy them and not worry about paying my rent. And my aunt would say, listen, you can't make $100 and spend $120. You better go to the bank and learn how to save your money. To this day, I still take that advice. I mean, I have to save and prepare for my retirement. I'm 60. I realize that I look 15. Yeah, right. Well, Clara, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story. I learned a lot about you that I didn't know before. So thank you. Well, this concludes episode 7 of La Yuma Cubana. the interview con la Prima. I appreciate you guys being here, and until next time, take care. Cuídate. Ciao.